In Rome, 1973, John Getty III, known as Paul, is wandering the streets at night when he meets a group of call girls. After noticing Paul's young age, they suggest he go back to his family. Paul asserts he's not a child and can look after himself. However, this claim is quickly challenged when a van pulls up and several men kidnap him. The kidnappers' leader, 50, locks Paul in a small cell at a secluded location and then calls Paul's mother, Gail, from a payphone, demanding $17 million for Paul's release. Gail replies that she doesn't have money, but 50 doesn't believe her, given the Getty family's wealth, prompting Gail to reflect on her past. 9 years earlier in San Francisco, Gail and her husband, John Getty Jr., are financially struggling. Gail convinces John Jr. to write to his estranged father, hoping to rekindle their relationship. Weeks later, John Jr. receives a telegram inviting him to Rome with the promise of a job opportunity. In 1966, John Paul Getty Sr. was declared the world's richest private citizen by the Guinness Book of Records, with a net worth of approximately $1.2 billion. As the founder of the Getty Oil Company, he was instrumental in extracting oil from the Saudi desert and was a pioneer in using supertanker marine transport. The family heads to Rome and meets John at his hotel, where he reconnects with his son. He mentions that he has been completely engrossed in his business over the past few years, neglecting his family and other interests. Being a leading fine art collector, John shows Paul an ancient Minotaur statue, which he bought for only $11 from an unknowing owner, but believes could now sell for over $1 million at auction. When Paul expresses his admiration for the statue, John insists on gifting it to him. As they leave, Gail notices clothes drying in the bathroom. John explains he prefers doing his own laundry to avoid the $10 room service fee. The trip ends with John Jr. appointed as the new executive vice president of European sales, prompting him to relocate his family to Rome. However, his newfound wealth soon causes him to fall into drug and alcohol abuse and engage in numerous affairs. Gail eventually files for divorce, but John and his high-cost lawyers intervene. To avoid a lengthy court battle, Gail agrees to a settlement forfeiting her rights to existing assets or child support in exchange for full custody of the children. In the present, John learns his grandson has been kidnapped and states in a live TV interview that he will not pay the ransom. When asked why, John explains that paying would only result in the potential kidnapping of his 14 other grandchildren, instead of just one. John calls on Fletcher Chase, a former CIA agent and now a trusted advisor, for help. Gail, unable to reach John by phone, goes to see him in person and meets Fletcher at John's mansion. John instructs Fletcher to look into the kidnapping, but tells him not to negotiate any ransom for Paul. In the days that follow, Fletcher and Gail team up to examine the kidnapping details. However, as days turn into weeks, 50 and his gang grow restless. Winter approaches, causing the compound where Paul is held to become unsuitable due to the cold. One day, when Paul goes to a field to relieve himself, a kidnapper, after turning away and lifting his mask, forgets to lower it, revealing his face to Paul. The kidnapper panics, but Paul assures him he saw nothing and wouldn't say anything. Despite this, the kidnapper and his associate point their guns at Paul. Shortly after, local authorities inform Gail that they have found her son's body, but it is badly burned, necessitating her to identify him. Fortunately, when the body is uncovered, it turns out not to be Paul but an adult male, later identified through forensic analysis as the kidnapper who accidentally revealed his face. The man's identity also helps pinpoint two known associates, Gino Bova and 50, both from the Calabria region in southern Italy. A raid on their hideout takes place, resulting in the deaths of 3 kidnappers. Sadly, Paul is no longer there, having recently been sold by 50 to another crime family. Fletcher then meets John, urging him to pay the ransom. Initially skeptical about the kidnapping's authenticity, Fletcher now acknowledges the seriousness of the situation and retracts his earlier suggestion that it might be a setup, confirming that Paul is in grave danger. Fletcher contacts 50 and attempts to negotiate the ransom but offers only $200,000. Highly offended, 50 curses at Fletcher and hangs up. Gail then hits Fletcher on the head with the phone receiver. Fletcher explains that even $200,000 was beyond his authorization, as John still insists he won't pay anything. The next day, John inspects a rare, much-desired painting. He tries to negotiate a lower price, but ends up paying the full $1.5 million when the seller refuses to lower it. Meanwhile, Paul, now with new captors who are celebrating with food and drink, uses lantern fluid and matchstick heads to start a fire in nearby brush. As the fire intensifies, Paul uses a metal rolling cart to break through the door and escapes on foot into a field. 50, who has grown to care for Paul over the last few months, watches him flee but waits until Paul is far away from the compound before notifying the others about the fire. Paul eventually reaches a rural road where he meets a local police officer. The officer takes Paul to his own home, where Paul has a warm meal and calls his mother. Before Paul can tell her his location, his kidnappers intercept the call and hang up. A few days later, a television show reminds Gail of the Minotaur statue, prompting her to retrieve it from a closet. She drives the statue to Sotheby's to sell it for part of the ransom, but is heartbroken to learn it's just a common item, worth only about $15 from museum gift shops. As time passes, the costs and risk of getting caught grow, pushing Paul's kidnappers to adopt a more forceful strategy in their ransom demands. They force him to drink alcohol, tie him down, and remove a part of his right ear with a scalpel. They then send the ear and a Polaroid photo to a local newspaper as part of their ransom tactic. Gail is offered $50,000 for permission to publish the photo, but instead, she chooses to receive 1,000 copies of the printed story, delivered to John's estate. This move catches John's attention, and he invites Gail to join him in London. When she arrives, Gail is shocked to see John Jr. in a wheelchair and in poor health. A loophole in the tax code means the ransom money could be considered a tax write-off if it's classified as a loan to his son. With this new knowledge, John agrees to provide the money, but only if Gail transfers custody of all her children, including Paul, to him. Feeling pressured, Gail signs the agreement reluctantly. Her disappointment grows when her lawyer later explains that U.S. tax law limits the deductible amount to $1 million. 50, who has already reduced his demands to $4 million, says $1 million won't be enough. To emphasize his point, 50 mentions he is no longer earning from this deal. His sole aim now is to ensure Paul returns home safely. John schedules a meeting with Fletcher, where he takes a moment to show a model of his under-construction California estate and discuss the trend of his company's stock price. Feeling annoyed, Fletcher bluntly tells John that the security he enjoys is thanks to him, and despite being wealthy, John is still a stingy, unhappy old man. John tries to reply, but Fletcher storms out, quitting his job. Gail's lawyer meets Fletcher at the airport and informs him that John sent the full ransom to Gail right after the meeting, along with a telegram nullifying the arranged custody deal. 50 then provides Fletcher with detailed exchange instructions. The 1.6 billion lira is to be exchanged on Sunday, in a Fiat car with 2 suitcases strapped to the roof. Exit the toll gate at 9 a.m. and head south at exactly 80 kilometers per hour until a stone hits the windshield, signaling to stop. Following the messenger's directions, the bags are to be unloaded by the roadside before Fletcher and Gail continue to the next gas station, where they should wait at the pay phone for more instructions. After the cash is counted and confirmed, 50 takes Paul to the meeting spot and bids him goodbye before Gail and Fletcher are given Paul's location. Shortly after, the kidnappers pack the money and get ready to leave their hideout, but they hear helicopters overhead. Believing Fletcher has alerted the police and betrayed them, the leader orders his men to find and kill Paul. Meanwhile, too restless after finally being freed to just sit still, Paul starts running down the road. Fletcher and Gail arrive shortly after, but they are too late. However, the fresh footprints on the ground show them which way Paul went. Paul reaches the deserted, closed town and roams through the streets looking for help, but since it's late and all the businesses are shut, his search is in vain. Both Fletcher and the kidnappers arrive in the town, and one of the kidnappers finds Paul first. 50 sees this and knocks the kidnapper out, enabling Paul to escape with his mother and Fletcher. Meanwhile, John wakes up suddenly, feeling confused and sweating heavily. He stumbles down the hallway into his study and dies while holding his cherished painting. After this, Gail asks Fletcher to stay with them, saying he is like part of the family. Fletcher, however, politely declines, explaining that his wealth often leads him into trouble. In John's will, his whole fortune is left to his grandchildren, with Gail, their mother, as the executor of the estate. John Paul Getty's massive art collection became the foundation of the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, and his family has donated much of his wealth to charitable causes. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Take care.